Today on Behind the Mystery, we're going to meet Carly, an active, animal-loving 25-year-old.
You see, Carly has a condition that only occurs in 1 or maybe 2 people out of every million, and it affects the very foundation of the human body.
There are currently only a handful of specialists in the United States who will treat it.
So, we want to introduce you to Carly and go behind the mystery of this ultra-rare disease.
This bone formation progression that happens over years and years is crippling to a point that I've not experienced with other disease processes in patients, even other chronic diseases.
My mom said the first thing she asked the doctor when I was born, what was wrong with my toes? And he just kind of made a joke of it and was like, oh, she'll never wear flip-flops as an adult.
At the suggestion of Carly's pediatrician, her parents brought her to a podiatrist when she was 2 years old.
They suggested surgery. My parents said no, it's not really bothering her right now. We'll come back if a problem presents.
It would be another 3 years before the true mystery of Carly's foot abnormality would properly be diagnosed.
And based on how dangerous and how rare Carly's condition turned out to be, it wasn't a moment too soon.
When I was 5, I hit back first on the tile floor. The doctor sent me for a biopsy for the swelling and pain in my back. And for some reason, my mom wanted a second opinion before we went into that biopsy. So that's when we saw Dr. Schmidt.
My ability to diagnose Carly was somewhat beyond my control because she was not my first patient with FOP. She happened to end up with me, the only other person in the office who had ever seen this before.
He took my socks off and we knew he knew something. We were in for my back, but he was looking at my toes.
And as soon as I felt and saw the mass on her chest, I pulled her socks off and I knew that she had FOP.
Finding Dr. Schmidt has been the best thing that could have happened in my journey. It's great to have someone that's there to listen, but he also cares and he is desperately trying to find a solution that works.
FOP, or Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, is a very rare genetic disorder in which people who have injury to connective tissue or muscle cannot turn off the inflammatory process. Any inflammation of connective tissue or muscle turns permanently to bone. So people become encased in a second skeleton over time. Although it's somewhat of a complex disease, it has 2 basic signs. The first is a shortening of their big toes. It is present at birth. The second physical finding is the formation of bone in places where it's not supposed to be. And typically early on in young children, this will appear as bumps on either the scalp or the nape of the neck. You don't have to have genetic testing to make the diagnosis, but you should have genetic testing because it helps us in the future to find cures, to find other genes that are close by. So I do encourage, if any clinician out there suspects FOP, to have the genetic testing done.
Let's hear firsthand from Carly to see how FOP affects her.
So at 5, I was diagnosed. At 6, my right hip locked. At 7, my jaw locked. And then from like 7 to 23, I lost some movement in my neck and my back, but it was nothing that we couldn't handle. So at 23, my hamstring flared, which moved up into my hip, and I started the worst flare-up of my life. Just as I was starting to recover, I took a little fall and hit my knee. My left knee and my left hip locked, which caused me to lose my ability to walk independently, go to the bathroom. I couldn't sleep like I used to sleep. So literally in a matter of months, I went from pretty independent, to only needed minimal help, to wheelchair bound. I had to figure out how to live my life again.
A flare-up of FOP can occur spontaneously or as a result of an illness or an injury. It's recognized by initially inflammation of the area that's affected. So the area will become swollen, red, hot. If there is an inflammatory process happening in a patient with FOP, we don't want to biopsy it. That's the last thing you want to do, is promote further injury to that tissue that's already damaged.
I had some moments that the panic set in, or the frustration. I remember one of my first times out after becoming wheelchair bound, I almost had a mental breakdown in the department store because I couldn't reach a shirt on the shelf. And normally I would have just stood up and grabbed it, but I couldn't do that anymore. So that was a big moment for me. But other than that, I deal with the pain and the permanence with a rather dark sense of humor, with a side of optimism. As I was growing up, I knew the severity of FOP. I knew the permanency, and I could see in others' lives how FOP had affected them. But at the same time, I tried to ignore it because I wanted to live my life the best I could, to the fullest I could, while I could.
There aren't a lot of treatments for FOP at this point. There are drug trials that are going on, but it's simply managing the flare-ups when they happen by treatment with anti-inflammatories or other steroids, and then plugging them into specialists that they may need for certain problems, but keeping close tabs on them while they're going to those specialists so that the specialists know what they can and can't do with a patient with FOP, because certain procedures may actually make the situation worse.
We've always been involved with the FOP community. Different things I've been involved in, whether it's clinical trials, to hopefully help not only me. I don't want some of the little FOPers I met to have to deal with this kind of lifestyle. So maybe if we can stop it with the medicine before they progress, they won't have the same challenges that I do. I've done talks about living with a service dog, or living independently. I have created a medical journal, so I did a talk about that. I just love to share my tools to make this complicated life a little easier.
What's been amazing to me is the patients that I have taken care of and the other patients that I've come to know have an amazing resilience and an ability to adapt to the situation. They develop a can-do attitude that says, I'm not going to let this control my life. Even though it does control my life, I'm not going to let it define me. So it's been something that has really buoyed my hope in the human spirit, that there's something within all of us that can overcome even obstacles like FOP.
Probably the biggest thing I want people to know is that we're still human. We're stuck in weird positions that are just as uncomfortable as they look. We want everything in life that you want. We just have to go about it a little bit differently. My advice to little FOPers or new FOP families is to never give up hope. There is a positive in the situation somewhere. You just have to look for it.
If you suspect you or someone you love may have FOP, we want you to write down these resources that we're about to share with you.
That's right. Go to focusonfop.com and ifopa.org. Of course, you can always go to our website, thebalancingAct.com.
And we'll be back right after this.